The title of today's message is Think on These Things, which comes out of Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And, I know being human beings, we're probably all going through something. It's just a matter of what it is. And every once in a while, we go through something good. And actually, most all the time, we're going through good things that we don't even realize because we're focused on the things that are more negative. So, but no matter what you're going through, I want to encourage you today. I just noticed Sharon sitting back there, Sharon Bergen, hi. And I saw Siler, earlier. Okay. So, but anyway, my objective is not to get you to deny the negative things you're going through, but to focus on the positive things you're going through, just like it says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And I'll mention something that gave me the idea to have this message. My dear sweet wife Linda always hated paying property taxes. And then I had this, when she was no longer able to do it, I started to have to pay the property taxes about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm pretty sure I hated as much as she did. And we don't have a whole lot of properties, but I've got properties in 3 different counties, and then each of those are in different taxing entities, like one's in Kilgore College and one's not. So those are broken down into more taxing entities. Plus the fact I don't like paying the overpriced property taxes. So, and I can tell you when the penalty goes into effect for not paying your property taxes on time. Does anybody know when that is in Texas? It's after January the 31st. So guess when I pay my property taxes? January the 31st, because I hate doing it. But anyway, I was watching the night before that this year, I was watching some YouTube videos. I've always loved old classic cars. And I know Cuba has a lot of neat old classic cars, and for a reason. The reason is because after Castro came into power, they were no longer able to buy modern American cars. So I think mostly they go up to 1958 or 59, and they've got some beautiful ones, some that look more beautiful than new. But anyway, so I was watching some videos that had the old classic cars in Cuba, and then eventually it gets to give the tour of Havana, and I started to realize just how blessed we are in this country that we take for granted. And you look at the videos, I think in my notes I've got a specific site you can go to, but just go to YouTube and put in Havana, Cuba. And there's a bunch of different tours you can take on the video on there. And it's just terrible. There'll be a pile of garbage going down the street about as long as from the stage back to that back wall there. And just all kinds of trash. And the city of Havana, I didn't know this, but it used to be like a stiff competition with really nice European cities. And you can see a lot of the old architecture that's really neat, but these buildings are just crumbling down. Some have fallen in, they haven't been maintained. And anybody want to take a guess what the average pay is in Cuba per month? $15. Try to survive on that. The government owns the housing, so people don't own anything from what I was told. But, and then if you go to the store to buy something, and it's not like there's a Walmart, you can go to one store and buy everything, or, large stores like that. Pretty much you go to a different store to buy each item, and you can expect to wait in line each time about 5 hours. So we can count our blessings and be glad we live here. So this time when I paid my property taxes the following day, I started thinking about, like it says in Philippians 4, think on these things. I started thinking about the benefits I get from paying my property taxes. Even though the money is grossly misused, but we do get police protection and fire protection, and we have nice roads. There are a lot of benefits, even though there should be more benefits, but It's a lot more beneficial living here than in Cuba. So let's turn to Philippians chapter 4, and we'll read verses 4 through 8. Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 8. Philippians 4, verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known among all men. The Lord is at hand. You know, it's easy to read over things like this, especially that we've read all our lives. It's easy to read over, the Lord is at hand. But if we're walking with God and He has all power, and if we don't need to be anxious about anything, because if there's a problem comes up and we're walking with Him, whatever the problem is, we've got it, or He's got it. You know, it may be something we don't want to have to go through, but still, even that is a blessing because God allows us to go through trials as He shapes us, molds us into His image. So back to verse 6. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, and that's key, thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. And then verse 8, my core scripture, says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there's anything praiseworthy, think on these things. True, what's true, noble, just, pure, lovely, of a good report, of virtue, and praiseworthy, those are the things we should think on. And we live in a world that practices just the opposite. If you turn on the network news in the morning like I used to do, and I hope you don't, you know, to kind of get your day started out so you know what's going on in the world, don't even go there. I discovered there's nothing good. It's almost all propaganda, and it's not there to help you have a good day. It's there to help tear you down. So if you watch the network news, and I used to do this, I don't do it anymore, but you wake up, you can watch Good Morning America or whatever, and you're going to hear 30 minutes of bad news. What went wrong last night? Then if you take a break at lunch and watch the news, more bad news. Watch it before you go to sleep and just kind of sense the deal that you're not going to sleep good because of all the bad news. And then you repeat it over day after day. So apparently the network news did not get the memo from Philippians chapter 4. And we have to remember we are to be the lights in the world. And a lot of people, and including us if we're not careful, we get stuck on this negative loop. You know, we'll think about something negative and then we'll repeat it over and over, and then that'll lead to something else negative. And if we're not careful, we'll spend all of our time on negative things. But we can't do that because we're supposed to be the light. So we have to be careful not to get stuck on that negative cycle. And I'll catch myself every once in a while, and I have some negative thought. And then I have to tell myself, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to think on these things, whatever's of good report. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 5, and we'll read verses 14 and 15. Matthew 5, 14 and 15. Verse 14. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. So we have to be the light of the world. And anytime we're around people, we should make it a point, whether it's at a convenience store or wherever, whenever we're interacting with someone, we need to make sure that we're shining the light, that we're not part of the darkness. And we should always try to lift people up and leave them in a better thought pattern than what they were when we approached them. It could be somebody at the convenience store or supermarket, a neighbor, a friend, a colleague. Let's think on the good and raise other people up. And the battle is all right up here. The battle is in our mind. That's where the biggest battles are we face. We should all realize, even on the worst day of our lives, that we're so incredibly blessed. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a couple of friends of mine that I know most all of you, probably all of you know one of them. And I think some know the other. But, and just as an aside, I was thinking about blessings. After I took a shower today and I was drying my toes off, and I was thinking, remembered back when I was in the 7th grade when my brother Gary and I got athlete's foot really bad at the feast. And we didn't have any skin on our toes. Neither one of us did, or at least I know I didn't. My toes were all white and infected, really painful, but I thank God for the skin on my toes. If you have skin on your toes, it might be a good idea to thank God for it. We have a whole lot of other things I bet you haven't thought about in 50 years, the blessings that you have. Then even in the worst moment of our lives, we're still incredibly blessed. And I'll just make a brief comment that the hardest moment of my life ever was when Linda died. But on the positive side, I could feel the presence of God in that room. And I think about that quite often. And when we go through trials, if we're walking with God, He's there, right there beside us. God, if we're walking with God, we know that He's going to restore life, perfect, healthy life, and forever. And I'll mention about my friend Randy. How many of you know Randy Steele? I see a few. Linda and I never met Randy and Diane until about 7 or 8 years ago at the barn dance. They were there and they got the prize for who came the furthest. And then I don't know, a year or two after that, they moved down here to be close to their grandchild. And Linda and I and Randy and Diane became pretty close. Just a little aside, Carol asked me on the way over if I get nervous when I speak, and I told her no. I said, these are friends. And then I interjected, they're old friends. Some of them are old friends. But that's true. But so in the scheme of things, Randy is a pretty new friend as of like the last 7 or 8 years. But we've become pretty close, and he and Diane were there for Linda and I as Linda declined and after she died. And, friendships like that are really special, but Randy has gone through so much. I think it's been, 6 years ago or so, he had open heart surgery. And then 2 years ago, this past spring, he had his lower left leg amputated. Diane died about 3 months ago. And then a few weeks later, Randy found out he has stage 4 cancer, and he's on hospice. And he's in the nursing home just 2 doors down from my house now. And I go over there and most every evening and spend quite a bit of time with him. But I'm just really struck by how through it all, I have never heard Randy complain. Through all of that, that's a lot to deal with. I mean, losing your wife, I can tell you, is a whole lot to deal with. And everything else thrown on top of that, I've never heard Randy complain. What I have heard him say is when he reads his Bible, it's like God is talking directly to him. And that's a really good thing. We all should be like that. So, we have all these blessings that constantly that we're totally oblivious to, just like I talked about the skin on my toes. What about that last breath you just took that you didn't even realize you took it? If you went to take it and it wasn't there, you would know. It would have your attention. But we get so used to all these blessings that we don't even notice them. It was in 2010, Linda and I and Wayne and Joanne Woodring went to Kelowna, Canada for the feast. And Linda and I were in bed asleep during the night, and I went to get that next breath, and it wasn't there. I had aspirated some food, and I just stood up in the bedroom for about 3 hours just trying to breathe. And moments like that, you really appreciate when you can get a breath, because it's kind of important. It's been several years ago, Linda and I had gone to Texarkana to CGI up there to church, and they had, I don't know if they still do, but at that time, they would have, after the prayer request, they would have testimonials if anyone wanted to give testimonials. And I really like that, because I think we're supposed to encourage one another with the healings that we have and the different blessings that we have from God. And so I raised my hand and I told about something that Linda and I were going through at the time, and it was a good thing. It was that, due to circumstances you may know about, Linda and I went through a really difficult financial situation. And we had just been able to get that resolved by paying off our house. And that was a pretty big deal. And I wanted to share that with everyone else, that this is a good thing that we're going through right now. So we need to be aware of those too. And when we go through a sore trial, we need to realize that God is working with us and shaping us into His image. And we're a lot more moldable when we're going through something bad than when we're going through some great time at a party and just, having a great time. But God has our attention when we're going through a severe trial, because we're sitting on the front row looking to Him and looking for answers, and more moldable. Let's turn to Hebrews 2, we'll read verses 9 through 11. Hebrews 2, verses 9 through 11. Verse 9, but we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that He, by the grace of God, might taste death for everyone. Verse 10, for it was fitting for Him, for whom all things made, I'll insert that word now, it makes it more clear, for whom all things made and by whom all things were made, and bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For both He who sanctifies and those who are being sanctified are all one, for which reason He is not ashamed to call them brethren. So Jesus Christ, that created us, lived a perfect life, sacrificed that perfect life, and was resurrected, is not ashamed to call us as brethren, who are sinners, who caused Him to die for our sins. So we should meditate on the incredible blessings that we've been given for all of our lives, things that we've had. Free air to breathe, an amazing body and brain, and He gives us a beautiful creation to enjoy. Our blessings are just endless. And I become more and more convinced continually that our greatest trials, when this life is all said and done, I think we will realize that our greatest trials were actually our greatest blessings. And that really puts a different spin on things, because that's when God's shaping us the most into His image. And I'll go ahead and mention about another friend here that I'm pretty sure you all know, Jerry and Dwight Holcomb. And I'm sure you know that Jerry had some real serious health problems here recently, and she was on dialysis, and I heard some really good news. Actually, Randy's the one that told me the other day that Jerry came by to visit him in the nursing home, and said that she's not on dialysis anymore. Actually, Mandy, Jerry's daughter Mandy, told me that the day before, I think, at church. But Randy was really excited to tell me this analogy that Jerry had, told him, which was just excellent. And I texted Jerry last night to get her permission to share this. But as Randy related it, Jerry compared her health problems recently to going on a whitewater rafting trip. And she said, from what Randy said, that her and her family always enjoy going on whitewater rafting trips. And those are pretty neat. Linda and I and another couple took our church teens 3 different years to whitewater rafting trip on the Ocoee River in eastern Tennessee, and then the Snake River in Wyoming, the Colorado River, even though we didn't get to the whitewater part because that's an 8-day trip, and once you get in, you can't get out until 8 days is up. But you know, the whitewater rafting trips are really enjoyable, and I remember on the Ocoee River, you know, they had the Olympics there back decades ago for the kayaking, and there's these nasty rapids, like one of them, the name of the rapids was Table Saw, because there's this big jagged rock right in the middle that you might hit. And, you know, there are other rapids like that. But Jerry's point was that God has custom designed a whitewater rafting trip for her, just for her, and that it's for her benefit and for her enjoyment. And I think that's what a great way to look at life, that when we go through these trials, if we're walking with God, we know God's got it, whatever it is. So I think we need to have gratitude for it and just walk with God through the program He has customized for us. Let's turn to Romans chapter 5. We'll read verses 2 through 4. Romans 5, verses 2 through 4. And welcome to anyone watching on the internet. I don't know who all watches here, except I know that my daughter's in-laws watch, at least from time to time, Lance and Daisy Christensen in Tucson. So hi to you if you're watching. Romans chapter 5, verses 2 through 4. Through whom also we have access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. So tribulations are a good thing. Then we can turn back to Romans chapter 4. We'll start in verses 8. But I want to read verse 9 as well. I'll just skip through the ones up to verse 8. But meditate on these things. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are noble, just, pure, lovely, good report, virtuous, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. And then verse 9, the things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. So Paul says the things that you've seen him do, that you've learned, do those also, which gets back to our job. That's what we're supposed to do, to be a good example for others and to shine the light for them. And speaking of Randy Steele, please continue to keep him in your prayers. They told him it's been over 2 months since he got the diagnosis of cancer. I think probably 2.5 months. And they told him without treatment, they expected he would have about 4 months. And he's not taking treatment. He's having more and more pain. But I'm sure he would really appreciate your prayers. And actually his son Breck, who works for the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, flew in Wednesday, and we were going to see if Randy was up to going out to eat, but he wasn't. But so I texted him yesterday morning. I told him, well, another option is you could come over for breakfast. And so him and Breck, his son, showed up in just a few minutes, and they came in and had breakfast with us. So that was really nice. And Randy texted me this morning, and Breck was supposed to fly back home today. I texted him, told him I hope they had a remainder of a nice visit, and he texted back and said they did, and said, it could be the last time, the last visit that he's able to have with his son. Which gets back to being grateful for what we have. I've still got my kids, my grandkids. You know, we all have who we have, and we need to be grateful for who we have. Then I'll mention Carl and Sharon Wilson, too. As you probably know, Carl and Sharon both have cancer. Sharon has breast cancer. She was diagnosed back several months ago now, and Carl was just recently, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago, was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So let's meditate very deeply on how incredibly blessed we are. And then when we meet somebody, when you go to that convenience store or wherever, and somebody says, "How are you doing?" Don't just go, "Oh boy, I've got all these problems." Somebody asks you how you're doing, honestly assess things and honestly say, "I'm incredibly blessed." And that in itself is going to put you in a better mood. It's going to put them in a better mood. And I typically do that, and I'm always struck with, fairly often somebody will say, the person I'm talking to will say, "So am I." And I think that helps raise their mood and reminds them how blessed they are. And it's interesting too, when I go visit our kids out of state, I typically say the same thing, and it's more of a secular society there. It's interesting, as opposed to being in the South, you know, here people are more inclined to say, "I'm blessed too." There, they're more inclined to not say anything or not really address what I said. Is anybody here familiar with the podcast of Dr. Chatterjee? I ran across him, I don't know, quite a few months ago, and I've seen a few of his podcasts. He had this lady, the last one I saw a couple of months ago, he had this lady on there by the name of, what is her name? Dr. Gladys McGarey. This is a partial picture of her. She's 102 years old. And a lot of people consider her the mother of holistic medicine. But I'm going to read here some of what she said in this article. And again, she's 102 years old. She says, many people consider her to be, well, he says, many people considers Gladys to be the mother of holistic medicine. For years now, she has been trying to spread the message that health is not just physical. It involves mental, emotional, and spiritual elements in equal measure. Says her message is that living a long and healthy life isn't about the right diet or taking vitamins or supplements. Instead, it requires a shift in perspective. A long life is all very well, but what are you living for? That's the important question. For many people, finding one's purpose in life feels like an optional extra that they don't really have time for because they're too busy working and raising children and caring for parents. But it's hard to know who we really are and what we want out of life. So Gladys insists we should still strive to identify our reason for getting out of bed every morning. That's great advice. We should realize that all of life's experiences exist to teach us something. Rather than stay a victim of heartbreak, she made a choice to move forward and help others. And she says we always have a choice in how we react to our circumstances. No doubt most all of you know who Toby Keith was, who died several months ago. And I watched him on some interviews, a few different interviews before he died. And I always thought of Toby Keith, we don't know these people personally, but my perception of him was always that he's kind of a wild guy and lived life on the edge. But one of his songs, I think this was one of his first songs, I really got a kick out of it, and you probably will recognize it. I think the title may be How Do You Like Me Now? And it's about when he was in high school. There's this pretty girl, I think she was a cheerleader, and he wanted her attention, but she would never give him the time of day. So he sticks with his music and becomes popular, and so now he's singing his song, How Do You Like Me Now? And I'm living on your radio. I'm here every morning when you wake up. But I thought it was a pretty cute song. But I was really struck by the fact that during Toby Keith's illness of cancer, stomach cancer, that he developed considerable faith in God. And he remarked on the different interviews I saw that he's not afraid of what happens in the future. He knew he was going to die unless God healed him, and that didn't look very apparent. But he basically said that, he was good with with whatever God allowed. So again, let's meditate on how incredibly blessed we are. You're having a hard time paying the bills maybe, or lost your job, problems in a relationship, severe health problems, terminal illness, worse yet, your mate's terminally ill. Well, let's just learn to praise God because he's got it. It's not always going to be something that we enjoy going through, but we can appreciate the fact that God is shaping us and molding us. Something else I wanted to mention is, I think I got this off of another YouTube channel I watch sometimes, but make a habit out of being around elderly people. And most all of us here have it made because we're them. But seriously, you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot from elderly people that have already had all these life's experiences, and plus the fact it's encouraging to them that you realize the value that they have from the experiences that they've had. So this YouTube channel I just made reference to is Dry Creek Wrangler School. And Dwayne is the guy that has the channel, him and his wife. And they have a Wrangler School. They have a ranch, and they bring young people in, mostly young people, and teach them how to ride horses. And I'm not talking about like a little carousel thing with ponies in the park, but this is on a ranch where they teach them horsemanship. And he's a really, really interesting guy to watch, and he has a lot of wisdom. And he's pretty much always smoking on a big cigar, and he tells what his cigar is. And I'm not promoting smoking cigars or anything else, but he does. But he has a lot of wisdom, and actually it's like watching a good sermon because he has a lot of really good points. He's passionate about being there, especially for young men who have not had the benefit of having a fatherly role model, and teaching young men how to become a good man. And our society really needs that. And one thing he says is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find another room. And there's a lot to that. What are you going to learn if you're the smartest guy in the room? Another story that he told was he lived in Alaska, I think more than once, and he was a peace officer in Alaska. And he'd gone to the police academy, and up there it's, from what he says, it's totally different. You go out to address an issue, and you're way out in the wilderness by yourself, you and your gun, and that's it. So it's different circumstances, and he did that, I think, in his early 20s, but when he was 38, he went back to the police academy to get recertified, I think, and he was in a dorm room with 3 other guys that were in their 20s. And I think all 3 of these other guys failed the test. And they were all really bothered by it. And Dwayne wisely told them, he said, don't worry about it. The test was designed to be failed. He said the real test is how you relate to when you did fail. Where do you go from there? That's the real test. I think that was very wise advice. Let's turn to James chapter 1. We'll read verses 2 through 5. We're told to count it all joy when we go through various trials. James verse 2, chapter 1 says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. And let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him." I'm pretty sure I mentioned this here before, but when my wife Linda was declining, our holistic doctor recommended that we both have a glass of red wine every evening and dark chocolate. So every evening, I would pour 2 glasses of red wine, get 2 pieces of dark chocolate, take it over to the chair where Linda was sitting, and I would sit beside her, and we would have our red wine and dark chocolate. And every evening, I would make a toast. And the toast was to the good old days, this day today, realizing that today is the good old days. Don't wait 30 years or 20 years to realize, oh, the good old days were 20 years ago, and I missed it. I didn't even realize it. I was so busy. Realize that today, and this day today, right now, August the 3rd, 2024, is still the good old days. I still have my children, my grandchildren, my friends. So don't miss the good old days by being too busy and not even paying attention. Something important to keep in mind is we have at least 2 safety nets that God gives us. When we go through a severe trial, God is there. He's there, and He will strengthen us to give us the strength to make it through. And then another safety net we have, which is like the ultimate safety net, is Revelation chapter 21, verse 4. We would all love to see our problems fixed right now, but that's not the reality, and that's not going to happen because God loves us too much to do that. God could solve every person's problem in the world just like that, but He chooses not to do that because He's shaping us into His image. And sometimes it involves patience. I think pretty much always it involves patience. But let's read in Revelation chapter 21, verse 4. This is awesome. "And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." In God's perfect timing, and I stress in His perfect timing, not our timing, I've discovered that God does not operate according to my timing. And I've figured out that's a good thing because His plans and His timing is better than mine. But in God's perfect timing, He will make all things good again. So we don't have to fear. Just trust in God and walk with Him. I think it's significant in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, it uses the word if there is any excellence. So that requires a little bit of thought on our part, is to look at our circumstances and say, well, is there any excellence in this? I'm pretty sure there is, even when it's painful. Then let's ask ourselves, what is that excellence? And how can I allow God to work with me through this and shape me? So let's not take for granted the people that God put in our lives. And, none of us are perfect. We tend to be more critical judges of other people than we are of ourselves. We tend to have a tendency humanly to give ourselves a free pass on things that we would be critical of other people. Whether it's a mate or a friend or people in our workplace or wherever, but we should be thankful for those people. And what we think of is ordinary, in a lot of ways, is really extraordinary. When we have a big problem, we need to do our part to resolve it and then hand it over to God and let him fix it. I remember back distinctly, it's been maybe 15 years ago or so, and I had this big problem. It's like this big old ball of tangled up fishing line. And I'd mess with it, try to untangle it and try to fix it, and then I'd give it to God. It's like, okay, I can't do this, you fix it, please. And then I'd find myself going back, reaching back up on the shelf, getting this big ball, trying to fix it again. But we need to do our part, but we need to trust God and allow him to do his part, because that's what he wants to do. So let's think on these things. Whatever is true, honest, whatever is just, pure, lovely, of a good report, any virtues and any praise, let's meditate on those things. Let's turn to Mark chapter 12, and we'll read verses 29 through 31. Mark 12, 29 through 31. Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it, is you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes our mind gets stuck on this negative loop, and we need to get off that treadmill and dwell on the positive things and spread that joy around. Just like Jerry said with her analogy of the whitewater rafting trip, let's make sure that we're on the trip with God and that he's there and we're trusting him, and allow him to work his good work in us. If we do these things, we will have the peace of God, because he is the God of peace. If we think on these things, we can have that peace.